I'll call today's meeting to order. First of all, the Town of Rocky Mountain House wishes to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is Treaty 6 territory and a traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous peoples, including the Blackfoot, Cree, Saulteaux, Stoney, and Métis. We have an agenda in front of us. I'll ask for additions to the agenda. On this side, this side.
Your Worship, 8.7, council resignation.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other additions, just a motion please to accept as amended. Councilor Fraser?
I so move.
All in favor? Carried. So, no delegations today. We'll move on to 5.1, the adoption of the previous minutes. Everybody's had a chance to read those. And council's wishes. Okay.
I'll make the motion to adopt minutes, previous minutes from January 19, 2021.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? Carried. So we're going to move on to number 7.1, the RFD for the Clean Energy Improvement Program update. I'll turn that over to Ms. Hartling.
Thank you, Your Worship. So further to our council meeting on December 15th, council requested that we bring back a report just providing an update on the FCM grant. I've provided information to all of you, so I'm very happy to report that we received the grant from FCM in the amount of $681 and change. $618,800. Yes. $618,800. Anyways, very, very happy to hear that. To provide you with a brief update where we're going from here. The master program agreement, we're supposed to be signing that sometime in February. I am still waiting to see a draft of that. Once we review it and get back to them with comments, we'll hopefully have that done fairly quickly from that point. Contractor recruitment in the grant application, we did put in for a local contractor to receive the training required to be able to do the pre and post audits. That's a requirement of the grant. So we thought to have a local contractor trained, it only made sense. So we're hoping to start promoting that sometime in February as well. We've got, they're looking at the live or at the website going live in February. It'll be kind of low key to start, but they'll start kind of ramping it up and trying to, kind of focus on promotions and communications for the program sometime in April. The MCCAC, they're going to be managing all of the contractor accounts through, it's called the Customer Relations Management Tool. So that will allow them to kind of keep up to date on any designations or training for any local contractors, because they'll have to go through a very brief program. We'll be offering some websites or some webinars as well with MCCAC to help the start of the promotion. We're hoping to kind of go live probably late March sometime, and we're kind of at this point I think we're still trying to be the first ones in Western Canada to get going on this. So
Good. Well, we look forward to the kickoff.
yes, me too.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? No, I think, okay, Councillor Alt?
Have we got a sign-up sheet? Like, we've already had interest from residents on this. Have we got a sign-up sheet where we've already got people?
Yeah, so both Laura and I are maintaining like a spreadsheet of people that are interested. And so once we have some of the pamphlets that are included in the attachment here, once those pamphlets are ready, we'll be contacting the people that we have in the spreadsheet. And there's contractors in there as well as residents.
Any other questions? So we have a recommended alternative. Councillor Phillips?
I'll make a motion that council accept the Clean Energy Improvement Program and Nexium grant application update as information.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? Thanks for that, Ms. Hartman. Okay, so we'll move on to 8.1, the RFD for fees, rates, and charges bylaw 2021/01.
Thank you, Your Worship. So following a review from each department, we basically went through the fees, rates, and charges. So we looked at last year's fees, rates, and charges, and incorporated some of the new fees under the QMP into that, as well as with the water, sewer, and solid waste, and the waste management bylaw coming forward. We've also incorporated the new fees under those documents into the new fees and rates. To give you kind of a brief review on what's changed, under Schedule C, I did include like a copy of Schedule C showing the changes in red. Basically what it is the addition of the QMP, so that's your electrical, plumbing, gas, those kinds of almost like building permit fees. Just pull this up. There was an addition of land use rates as well for the post house. And then we just moved a couple of tables around. There's the QMP fees. And then under Schedule E, sorry, this table is, or this screen is a bit frustrating. So under Schedule E, we kind of incorporated some changes. And this, again, kind of relates back to the water, sewer, solid waste bylaw. In talking with the various departments, like when we did the fees and rates and then talking with engineering, the practice is to have a disconnection fee as well. And then, of course, the waste collection fees, we updated that to incorporate the Eco Center, just for some clarification. And I'll go through some of these changes as well. So basically, there is, under the Schedule E, pardon me, the residents that receive the collection service pay a rate of $27.52. That rate has not changed. It just allows them in the fees and rates, there's clarification that that fee allows them access to the Eco Center. Likewise for non-residential, the fee is $16.98, and that fee is for those that do not receive the collection service. And again, that fee hasn't changed. It just provides clarification as to access to the Eco Center. We also added a non-resident fee. And the non-resident fee is consistent with what is charged to people that do not receive the collection service. So it's $16.98 per month. It's rounded up by a few cents to $2.04 per year. We put the fee in here per year because we thought administratively it would be just better for people to pay on an annual basis rather than per month. And then the last schedule The only changes on this last schedule is, there was H, sorry, we've missed recreation here. So we moved one of the tables, basically just lower down. That was from feedback from recreation. And then we made the change to accommodate the council direction on the Rocky Pass for the 75 plus. And that was basically it. They included an additional flood as requested by user under the fees for the ice floods. And there's the, this is where the 75 plus is referenced. And then of course that made the change to the youth and senior rates here. And then we removed some of the amending bylaws because we'll be repealing those under the new fees and rates. There was an addition of a fitness instructor fee. And then just a clarification that GST is extra on the program guide and advertising. There was, I believe there were some requests that came in. So Recreation requested that we add a parking lot or drive-in movies and parking for the NSRP. And then just some kind of administrative changes to provide some clarity and to reflect more of the practices. And then the last schedule that's on there, the Schedule H, it's really just removing the references to the previous amendments on the bylaw. And that's the only change throughout the document. Pardon me.
Sorry, I was just going to ask you a quick question about the non-res. So talking about waste pickup and the fee, so $16.98, that's talking commercial as well.
Yes.
So what, right now businesses have to pay the $16.98 and then they're responsible
That's right.
to get there, to have a commercial hauler?
That's right, yeah. And that's actually reflected in the bylaw for the solid waste.
Okay, yeah. Councilor Fraser?
It's more of just a clerical issue because it's correct in the bylaw itself. It's on page 3. Second paragraph from the bottom, it says 240 per year
Yes,
instead of 204, just because I know sometimes people don't dig into the bylaws themselves.
Yeah, that's a typo.
Okay.
My apologies for that.
Oh, no worries. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, so the fee in the bylaw is correct. And
Yes.
the fee in the RFD is a typo.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions on this, the fees and rates bylaw?
I did provide a clean copy as well of all of the schedules. So the new bylaw would repeal all of the old, it would repeal the 2020-01 as well as the amendments, 2020-07 and 17.
Okay, very good, thank you. Everybody's clear on that? Good, no other questions? Okay, seeing no other questions, we have an alternative in front of us. Councilor Brown?
I'd like to make a motion that council adopt fees, rates, and charges bylaw 2021/01 as presented.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? Carried. Councilor Fraser?
I move that council give second reading to the fees, rates, and charges bylaw 2021/01.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? Carried. Councilor Phillips?
I'll make a motion that council give unanimous consent to proceed to third reading for fees, rates, and charges bylaw 2021/01.
All in favor of that motion? Carried. Councilor Narang?
Be it resolved that council give third and final reading to fees, rates, and charges bylaw 2021/1.
All in favor of that motion? Good, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, Council.
Okay, so we'll move on to 8.2. The waste management bylaw.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Laura, would you mind turning that light off, please? Thanks. Thank you. Hello.
So with the waste management bylaw, this basically followed an administrative inquiry from Councillor Brown back in March of 2020. Upon review of the old bylaw, the Water, Sewer, and Solid Waste Bylaw 2019-05B, it was determined that there were changes required. Because council was also reviewing the solid waste, there was a determination that we should remove the solid waste and create a separate bylaw for that, and create another separate bylaw for the water, sewer, and storm. And so that's the next RFD that will come forward. So with regards to the waste management bylaw, basically there was discussions held with the Department of Engineering, corporate services, as to processes and things that were missing from the original bylaw. We went through it with on numerous occasions, just to ensure that we were meeting all of the requirements. We then made the change with Eco Center, so we went back again to the bylaw and made some additions to incorporate the changes with respect to the Eco Center. Under the definitions, we added Eco Center, non-resident, organics material, and Rocky Pass. We also provided some clarification with respect to residential complexes, apartments, and non-residential premises. In section 2, basically, there's just clarification as to some of the administrative details, just that all schedules form part of the bylaw, and some kind of technical legality issues here. So it's just referring to, this doesn't, it's still, they would still have to comply with other federal and provincial regulations. Section 3 is fairly general as well. It looks at the powers of the administrator, general details about the collection service, and just some disposal prohibitions are in here as well. Under section 4, it outlines some of the details of the collection carts. This is the section, that says, we incorporated into here as well for organics, anticipating the new program coming up in the spring. It talks about responsibilities of the owners, the responsibilities of tenants, and the responsibilities of the collection contractor. And it talks about the size as well of the collection cart and how the cart should be, the material it should be made of and whatnot. Section 5, we kind of start looking at some of the waste material and organics collection and disposal. So in this area, we're talking about, certain items that should or should not be put into the various carts. We have separated, what can go into the black carts versus the organics carts. There's a schedule at the back of the bylaw that kind of lists some of these materials that can go in. Talks about where the carts should be located. This is where Councillor Brown's, I believe it was in this area where Councillor Brown's administrative inquiry is addressed. And so we incorporated, I think it was APM that you had requested, and it's incorporated into the bylaw as well. The recycling service for the Eco Center. It will provide the location for recycling services and bagged waste material drop-off. It also clarifies that everybody that does access the center has to have a Rocky Pass. Again, recyclables are attached in a schedule, so it gives some clarification to users of what they can drop off there. There's some prohibitions in here about what we don't want to see at the Eco Center. And then it just clarifies that all recyclables should be dropped off in a clean and dry condition. Talks about minimizing scattering by the wind. And then here is where you had inquired earlier, Your Worship, regarding for non-residential premises, apartment buildings, and some complexes, just for them that they have to arrange for a private hauler. Under section 8, this is for non-residents. It was just pretty straightforward and simple that they can access the center by paying and that they will require a Rocky Pass to access it. Section 9 just refers to the fees and rates, so it goes back to the fees and rates bylaw, makes some clarification as to the costs, any outstanding utility bills, transfer of, unpaid utility bills to the tax roll. And then sections 10 through 13 talk about prohibitions, offenses, and penalties. So one of the things we did add in the schedules are application forms. The application forms, this is the schedule for recyclable materials, organics, and then the penalties. One of the things with the penalties is council had requested a comparison, so I did attach a comparison sheet of some other municipalities and what they charge. And based on that, I did, there was a reduction here. So it was more in line with what other municipalities were charging. And I'll just pull up that comparison for you quickly here. So there was some consistency in terms of second offenses, third offenses, that, they're charged more if it's kind of a repeat kind of offense. And most of them were around that $100 to $150 mark for the first offense, with more serious prohibitions kind of, going up in value. Does council have any questions on that?
Anybody have any questions on that? Councillor Narang?
I just have two. Is that listing of the organics, is that an exhaustive list, or will that change when the program is introduced? Or is that something that we've worked on with Embringham to identify?
I think it's always, that we can always look at changing it for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then this is just a question about the weight limitation on the bins. Like, who's weighing it?
Well, I think it's, the weight is there, I would expect, because of the contractor.
Right.
It's, and the construction of the carts as well. Like, if there's too much weight in there, I think that there could be damage to the carts.
Yeah,
But in terms of who's weighing, it just kind of sets a guideline, I think.
Okay.
Your Worship, I think the trucks actually do.
They do they? Okay.
Yes. They can tell the weight of it by.
Interesting. Okay. And then I also just noticed then there's also no penalty for being overweight consistently.
Your Worship, so if it's overweight, they won't pick it.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
I have question about organics for commercial. Could there be a place eventually for, say if some of the commercial places find they have a lot more organics, a spot to drop off? Is that something that we could look at?
Yeah, Your Worship, so I think the organics is a growing program.
Okay.
So the initial step is obviously the curbside.
Sure.
And then after that's up and running, on the commercial side, because it might even be commercial bins.
Sure, okay.
Especially for restaurants and so
Right.
forth.
Then we would just change this.
Then we would revise the bylaw.
Okay, sounds good. Councillor Brown?
I just want to thank administration for the hard work they've put into this. It's nice to arrive at this point. We now have a modern, realistic, and fair system, and I'm really satisfied with what the product that's been put forward. Thank you.
Good, for sure. You stole our thunder. Thank you for that, Councillor Brown. That's great, great job. Any other questions? Okay. We have a recommended alternative in front of us. Councillor Brown?
And I'd like to put forth the motion that it be it resolved that council give first reading to Waste Management Bylaw 2020/25, a bylaw to regulate solid waste, organics, and recycling in the town of Rocky Mountain House as presented.
Great. All in favor of that motion? Carried. Okay, so we'll move on to 8.3.
So Your Worship, we'll bring this bylaw back then. I mean, we only recommended the first reading just because it's a new bylaw to give council more time to go through it. And that's,
Yeah, and I appreciate that because, I mean, as the weeks go on, things may come up too, so yeah, that's good. Okay, so 8.3, the water, sewer, and storm utility bylaw.
Thank you, Your Worship. So again, this goes back to Councillor Brown's administrative inquiry back in March.
Causing trouble.
Yeah, that's right.
I was the problem.
I had a bad night's sleep, okay?
We found, it was a good thing because there were references that needed to be updated and changed. And again, we went through a process, had several meetings with engineering and corporate services in this regard. Went through various aspects of the bylaw, really just kind of started from scratch, to be honest with you. It was a process. So, under the bylaw, there are a couple of things that I should bring to council's attention. So one of the things is the possibility of having properties affected by the high water table. That was one of the things that council had brought forward, that properties that are affected by the high water table and the possibility of them having the water pumped into the system. So we have incorporated this after discussion with engineering about the possibility for this. We have incorporated this into the bylaw under section, I think it's 12.26. Sorry, taking a long time to scroll through here. There is an application process to go through for this, and an inspection, and someone from engineering would look at the property, do an inspection to confirm whether someone could participate. So basically, they wouldn't be allowed to pump it into the sewer system, the sewer utility system. However, drains, their eave troughs would not be allowed.
Is that specifically Creekside? Is that what we were talking about? Is that where that came from?
I think that's where the conversation started.
Your Worship, but the bylaw's not drafted specifically to
No,
Creekside.
no, for sure. I was wondering, making sure I remembered the correct conversation that came out of.
Yeah, that's kind of where the conversation started.
Okay, thank you.
But we wanted to kind of create a broader bylaw to allow properties that might exist in the town that aren't in Creekside that might benefit from this. The other thing I wanted to draw council's attention to is under section 14, it was the transition. So the transition from, for the utility transition from tenants to owners, and we were looking at doing that transition, hoping to have it done for December 31st, 2021. There was a table provided in an RFT that kind of outlined some of the costs related to accounts that kind of walk away from their utility bills. And, you know, over several years, the amount was pretty substantial. It's over $43,000.
Your worship, for clarification, in the existing bylaw, it's actually 2023.
That's right.
That's right, because it was an initial 5-year turnover, what
Right.
council wanted. So
Yeah.
we're just revisiting that, so that's for council's discussion.
There was originally 250 accounts that needed to be transitioned, and currently they're down to 180 accounts.
Sorry, 180
180,
that still need to be transitioned into the landlord's name.
that's right.
So what kind of notice will we give the landlords then that we're considering changing that date by a year?
I would expect we would do something up, if council should approve it, we would do a letter up, I would expect, right away.
Your worship, maybe I'll have Ms. Quinlan.
Okay.
Terry, we haven't set a notice period, but we certainly would advise them, and I'm thinking we give them at least 90 days. You know, or anywhere from 30 to 90 days, saying that, you know, we're gonna transition. The existing process is both parties, like I myself am a renter, both parties still get an invoice, so the renter would get a copy, but the landlord would also get a copy if necessary, so they can see if there's any issues going on. But we'll create a transition period for that.
Okay, I personally would like to see a little bit longer than 90 days. Is it possible to see 6 months? Is that something reasonable, or to forewarn them that?
Yeah, your worship, and we definitely have the time to do that.
Yes.
Right, because it's only February.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it makes sense, because in 2019, we saw 22,000, just about $23,000 that we had written off, so. Okay.
And basically, the rest of the bylaw is written to just protect the assets of the town. There's regulations in here about contacting, you know, the CAO or designate, which would be Rob. You know, if there's anything being dumped into the sewer systems, it does provide some clarity. One of the things that some of the folks at engineering were concerned about is because we did put values in here, so we did incorporate into some of the restricted values here that it's still at the discretion of the engineering department. Let's see what else we have here. Penalties. And then application forms. So we did actually bring them into the bylaw itself.
Can you scoot that down a little bit?
Sure.
Or sorry, up. The other way, yeah. Go farther, just the beginning of that, farther up, yeah. Something about false information? Where was that?
Oh, there's false information if somebody were to report something occurring that didn't occur. You know, say that somebody's dumping when they're not, to cause trouble or to...
How do we charge for that? I'm just,
Your worship, that'd be a ticket.
okay.
Yeah.
But who proves that they gave false information?
That would be up to our peace officers.
Any other questions on this? No?
We did also incorporate into the bylaw a requirement for properties to have to tie into existing water mains and sewer mains, you know, for new builds, and if their septic tank or their septic fields, if they had to get a permit to fix their septic field, they should be tying into the town's sewer system. So we did provide some clarification on, you know, when that time would come. It's,
So who would that be? Who's the customer?
Your worship, so for example, McNutt, if we ever installed water and sewer through that subdivision, it'd be a requirement that they would have to connect to the town's utility system.
Okay.
But that requirement would be at the time when they had to, like you say, repair their septic field or whatever. It wouldn't be automatic. It would be grandfathered in as needed.
Yes.
so rather than somebody having the option to repair their septic field, which costs a significant amount of money, you know, the idea is to get everybody onto the water and sewer system. And if there's a water main or a sewer main adjacent to the property line, they have to connect, rather than get a permit to put in a new septic field.
So how many properties in town are like that? Just that one particular subdivision, or some of the properties perhaps over in town?
Old Town has some.
There's quite a few out there.
Is there?
Yep. Creekside South, from the approach going into Creekside, everything south of that is on well.
Okay.
There's, I think, 3 or 4 in Old Town that are the same.
So has this been an ongoing practice already?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Rainbow Forward.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
they're all over the place.
Okay. So it's probably, just to clarify, it's probably more cost effective than to tie into the town water and sewer than it is to replace an outdated septic field.
Yeah, if it's right adjacent to it. We're actually dealing with this right now with the owner of a property and trying to find the best solution for him. And he has both options, I think, whether it'll be it's his own system or he has to tie into the town.
Okay.
It's just, all comes down to how far you have to go.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
And just to finish up on, we did add a number of different application forms here. So there's one for a new account. There's another form for duplicate invoice. And then this is the high water ground mitigation application. And we just wanted to incorporate the forms into the bylaw so there was consistency.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Councillor Phillips?
I just think it's a great idea that we've allowed high water table areas to have the ability to tie into our sewer system. That will help a lot of residents with ongoing water issues. I think it will definitely give them an option to help with that.
Okay, seeing no other comments? Councillor Phillips?
If there's no other comments, I'd like to make a motion that council give first reading to Water, Sewer, and Storm Bylaw 2020/11, a bylaw to regulate and provide the water and/or use of water collection and disposal of sewers and collection and disposal of storm water in the municipality.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Councillor Frey, or Councillor Auld?
Be resolved that council gives second reading to Water, Sewer, and Storm Bylaw 2020/11.
All in favor of that motion? Carried. Councillor Fraser,
I will move that council give unanimous consent to move to third reading of water, sewer, and storm bylaw 2020/11.
all in favor of that motion? Okay. Councillor Brown,
Be it resolved that council give third and final reading to water, sewer, and storm bylaw 2020/11.
all in favor of that motion? Okay, that's carried. Thanks.
Thank you, your worship and council.
Moving on to number .4, the sanitary sewer backup policy.
Good afternoon, your worship.
Good afternoon.
So with the sanitary sewer backup policy, basically it goes over the roles and responsibilities of the town when we are called, what the initial response will be, what the backups are, goes into detail, objects in the lines, and again, who is responsible for that. Right down to cleaning the main lines, whether it's our problem or not. It's just updating the old one, which I think was done a couple years back.
The last bylaw?
2003.
Yeah, quite a few.
Quite a few years. So this is the new and improved.
All right. Did anybody have any concerns, comments on this?
It's good that we're just streamlining everything that we're doing right now.
I agree, it's bringing everything up to date. So,
We've been doing this practice for years. It was just never really captured on paper.
okay.
So
Okay. That's great. Well, that was,
That was easy.
anybody, Councillor Alt?
There's no other discussion. I'll move the council adopt sanitary sewer backup policies 002/2021 as presented.
All in favor of that motion? Carried. Thanks, Mr. Shanks. So are you up next too?
Yep.
8.5, we'll move on to receiving water quality assessment.
So with this RFD, we had to do a new approval for our water treatment plant for treating the water. And with that approval, they've thrown at us, we need to do an environmental impact study. It's a little costly, $30,000 to do this study. We have 3 years, I believe it is, to do the study. And really what it is doing is the water that we pull into the plant and treat, there's sediment that goes into the plant. And when they do a back flush, that sediment is supposed to go back out into the river. Scheduled however often they need to do it. There's a few options that we have with this. One is just to direct it right into the sewer, the sanitary sewer line. We don't like this option. It just causes grief with our pumps, and eventually it's going to plug off the system, and that's not good. The other one is to have settling ponds. Not sure how that would play out down there unless we got rid of a park playground to have that, and you're right beside the river, so it's no good again. So this process that we're asking to do, they'll come up with ideas on how to come up with this.
Seems a little frustrating, doesn't it?
It is, it really is.
That kind of money to do a study.
Yeah.
Councillor Alt?
Is there any government grants that we can use to apply to do that study?
I don't know, I'd have to do some digging into that.
Worship, I don't think there is, because this is being imposed by us through the Alberta Environment. If any grant would apply, it'd be Alberta Water, Wastewater. And I don't even know if this would qualify, because it's a study. If there, out of this study there comes a project, then we could apply for the project.
Councillor Fraser?
I guess my question is, so the water comes into the plant and we treat it, and the sediment that was already in the river goes back out to the river. I'm just not sure how that's our responsibility, since we have no control over that, especially if there's going to be environmental things coming down from coal mines or...
And that's exactly what our water treatment plant manager has conveyed back to them. It makes no sense. It's, to us, it's more of a, sorry, a money grab is what it is. We're throwing a lot of money away on something that we've been doing for years and years. You look at when we have a heavy rainfall, you look at in the spring with runoff, the amount of sediment that goes through that river is nothing. Or, sorry, it's a lot compared to what we're actually putting back into it. And there's occasions where you could go out and actually test the water and it wouldn't pass that's in the river. But we treat it and put minimal amounts of sediment back in.
Your Worship, this study might just show there is no environmental impact, but then we would satisfy Alberta Environment.
At $32,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, my frustration in this is that we have to spend $32,000 to prove that we have no problem in the first place. That's very, very frustrating that we have to spend this kind of money.
Yeah, there should be grants.
Are other communities having to do the same?
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Auld?
Is this an ongoing, like, is this so we have to put in a system so that we can ongoingly monitor what's going on, the changes?
It will eventually go that way, yes. It's not a one-time deal. This is very financially impacting us.
So looking down the road, it's strictly to monitor what they're changing in the West Country then?
So how much would that monitoring system be?
No idea.
Your Worship, like the monitoring, like going...
Yeah, like say they find something on this study, what would they make us implement, do you think?
Your Worship, so then we would no longer, if we do have an environmental impact and they require us to do something different, then we have to go to another option. Like as Mr. Shank said, into our sanitary sewer system, which really isn't an option because you put a bunch of sediment in there. Or we create holding tanks. So when we backwash, it would go into a holding tank, settle out, and then eventually be discharged back into the river.
So do we have any idea what that type of a system would cost?
That will...
No, I could definitely find out. There are other communities that have gone through this. Part of that MPE study they've done with other places. Like it's going to be costly.
Especially for the location of our plant.
Oh, sure.
Right on the river.
The lowest point.
Down an embankment. So it's not like we have open areas to build retention ponds.
Right. Councillor Fraser?
Well, over the last few years, they've been creating larger regional water systems. Like there's one down south where like a small town basically is the hub and provides water and wastewater to a large area. And I think there was a discussion about Red Deer doing something similar with its surrounding areas. Would that make sense to start looking at what a regional system would look like if we're going to be at the end of this? The impetus is going to be you need a much larger, more complicated system for your water, wastewater, then maybe we should be doing it for the whole region. And I know there are lots of grants for that because regional systems are being supported through grants. So maybe that's something we should have in our long-range plan.
Okay. good discussion. I mean,
It's absolutely ridiculous because in runoff, the water that's coming down that river would not meet the standards of us putting it back into the river. So the water is contaminated before it even gets into the system.
That's why you treat it.
How are you supposed to treat it, put it back, just to have it recontaminated 10 feet down the pipe?
is this worth a letter to Alberta Environment to ask for more clarification as to why and do they understand like what this is for us?
I would think yes. Not from me, though.
Your worship, we can inquire further and bring this back to council. I mean, there's not, we do have 2 years to do this study. 23.
Well, it just seems like, you're hearing, we're cutting red tape, we're doing this, we're doing that, and now to put this on and especially in a year where there's been other downloading and cost to municipalities, this just seems, I mean, I'm all for protecting the water, don't get me wrong, but if this is somehow a little bit redundant?
I mean, your worship, the only thing that we put back into the river that we don't take from the river would be our alum, aluminum that we use to settle out the sediments. So,
Okay.
Even that's a minor amounts.
Okay, Councillor Phillips?
So if we are sending a letter to the provincial government, which I think we should, we had the same situation happening with the sewer emissions that we're putting back into the river, that the province had one set of guidelines, now the federal government set another set of guidelines. Are we going to see the same thing with this situation where the province now does something and then the federal government's going to trump it and we're going to have to do something different?
You mean effluent? Is that what you mean?
Well, the
Is it
effluent.
emissions?
Yeah, sorry, the effluent. Is it going to be the same thing? We're going to have a provincial standard, and then the federal government's going to come around and put a different standard on it, and we're going to meet one standard, and now we're going to have to change it to meet a federal standard. Is that something that potentially could happen here as well?
your worship, possibly, the environmental standards for both our water and wastewater are constantly increasing, and they've gone dramatically over the last 10, 20 years, to be honest. And we're seeing that effect on our sewage lagoon for sure. But Mr. Shanks and I can set a meeting and meet with the regional director to discuss this and come back to council.
Sure, okay, that sounds good. I'm Councilor Narang and then Councilor Brown.
I'm mostly just repeating that this doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm glad that everybody was feeling the same way I did, because it really doesn't make sense at all that this is something that we would pay for. Yeah,
Study.
so, yeah, it makes no sense if we're putting like Dean said, we're not really putting anything back in that we haven't already taken out, so that's interesting. So I'm glad that everybody else is feeling the same confusion.
Okay. Councilor Brown?
Just if we're considering writing a letter, and we know that other communities are being affected in the same way, is it worth having some conversations with the other affected communities and maybe seek some support from them?
Sure.
From our Whitecourt and Drayton, they're all going to be doing the same thing on the same river.
For sure. Okay, so we'll just perhaps have Mr. Shanks and Mr. Kraus then have the discussion first
With the regional director, and then we'll talk to other municipalities and see how they're handling it.
Okay.
And we'll report back to council.
Okay, yeah, I think, if we're all having to do a $32,000 study to find out the same thing, it doesn't make sense.
So we'll try to deal with it administratively, and then if not, then we'd be asking council to talk to the minister.
Okay, so then we'll just look for a motion to accept this as information then for now.
Yeah, and for administration to bring back further details after our meeting. So.
Okay. Councillor Auld?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, thank you. Is everybody clear on that motion? You got that, Councillor Auld?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? Carried. Okay. Thank you for that. And number 8.6, design guidelines.
Sorry, Stan. I have it.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, Council. Just before you today in regards to our design guidelines. It's a document that planning department uses, but also engineering and operations use when a new developer or developer comes to the community. We kind of lay out our minimum standards that we require for new development, as well as say if they want to do some changes to that development or even with landscaping, it's all part of this document. Our old one is from 2007. There was never no policy in place from the one in 2007. Things have changed in regards to the design guidelines in the community as well, also in the industry. So before council, just to pass the policy for the design guidelines 001-2021. Questions regarding the document? It's a large document. It took us quite a while to get through it all in regards to making sure that we did everything proper, I guess, in regards to the measurements and design guidelines for the size of pipe that's required and that type of stuff. So,
Can you just think of some of the most significant changes in this document?
Probably one of the biggest one is FX Creekside out there with our storm system. We talked about strapping manholes and relining while you're doing the installs instead of waiting till after the fact when the problem hits. So that's probably.
and as far as the planning side of it, we've introduced kind of the guidelines and the layout as far as when you come to town, as far as outline plan, area structure plan, kind of if they're not familiar with the steps that's required, we've implemented them into this document as well. So it's made it user-friendly for existing developers, but also new developers that want to develop within the community.
Okay, anybody have any other questions?
It's pretty thorough.
It's a big report, but it's pretty in-depth.
Yeah, and so all of the developers, they'll all get notice that this is new and, okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull back my, Councillor Phillips?
It's great to see this just from the viewpoint that, you know, we talk about cutting red tape. This is something that will cut red tape for a developer when they're looking at bringing something new to town or an existing developer. It just makes it much simpler, easier process for them. It's good work. It's a great thing to see.
Okay. We have some.
I actually have a question.
Councillor
Sort of
Nance,
question.
yeah.
So the last time this was done, or the oldest, the original, or the one that we're updating is 2007? So what kind of impact does leaving these things for so long have on, say, Rocky Mountain House being open for development, or saying, yeah, we want to bring development here? Like, is that detrimental, would you say, to a community to be leaving things for that long?
Your Worship, I do think it's a bit detrimental because it causes a lot of confusion. So what councils what Mr. Shanks and Mr. Schwader have done over the last, well, this one took 2 years to finalize, so thank you very much, because there was a lot of work. But if you notice in the last council meeting, we got rid of a lot of old policies and stuff like that. So previous to that, if anyone asks a question, I mean, the administration has to follow policy, and we're working with outdated policies and stuff like that, and often conflict, it causes a lot of confusion. So what Mr. Shanks and Mr. Schwader have successfully done, along with Ms. Harden, is that we've got rid of all of that now. So everything is up to date and clear in the development world. So anyone coming in, there's no contradiction between policies. They're up to date.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then that with the new LUB and the MTP, and I mean, it's yeah, thank you. It's been a lot of work for you
So
guys.
much work, yes. That's just
Urban
awesome.
did a fantastic job with it.
Yeah,
And
that's
a lot
great.
of legwork.
Good.
How to kill a bad reputation.
Yeah,
That's
no,
kind of
it's-
what I'm getting at. Like, I mean, like you said, last meeting was 1993. We were
Some of this stuff.
updating policy. policy. So I think that this is really good, and it must make administration's job a lot easier, especially from a development perspective, to be able to say, yes, we are all up to date, and these are all the answers to the questions that you're probably getting. So I think it's exciting for the community for sure.
So the cutting the red tape is actually just, it was just old tape. It wasn't even really red tape, right? It was just old, and you had to...
Duct tape holding everything together.
That's right, exactly. Councillor Fraser?
Oh, I was just gonna ask, like, what's the effect on our asset management, just to make sure that our design guidelines are up to modern guidelines as to what methods they're using and what products they're using and how they're tying things in? I imagine that probably makes the different items last longer, especially when they're tied into our system, or they become our responsibility once the development is finished, so.
Yeah, it really does. We get to determine water pipe, what class of pipe is going to go in the ground. Years ago, it didn't matter. You put out a tender and they submitted and they put in the ground what they had. And we're finding that now with a lot of service breaks in certain areas because they used a cheaper pipe. Well, that's not the case anymore. For us, it's cost savings, doing repairs to a curb stop. Right now, there's a ton of them in driveways. Well, we're suggesting not in the driveway, put them side by side for two properties and have the driveways on the opposite sides.
Right.
If possible, type of thing. So
It just makes sense.
it does. Every little bit helps.
Yeah. How can we get this out to the public that this is really what's happened? This document is now just bringing the community, the development community, up to date. So.
We'll get it out there.
Okay, that's good.
And can you make it look really exciting?
So one key thing with the design guidelines, it's always going to be a little fluid because as new technology comes up, we have to adapt. And actually, it's right in here that if someone brings something forward and really, if it makes sense and it works, then administration can improve it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You can just update.
Perfect.
Is there a review schedule in there? Like, so that it is something that isn't left for that? Or is it just like you said, will be ongoing?
So, Your Worship, it should be ongoing with our land use bylaw and municipal development plan. I mean, those plans are generally geared for a 10-year before they're fully redone, but they should have a good thorough review every 5 years. So this should be all together now.
Councillor Phillips?
And another point that has to be looked at as well is now that we're doing these design guidelines policy and we've updated the land use bylaw and MDP, that will reduce the number of MPC committee meetings that have to take place because it's laid out in those rules and regulations. It's very easy for admin to make things happen now instead of having to go back for all those meetings.
Any more discussion on this? Okay. Councillor Fraser, on that, making it streamlined. So we'll move on to 8.7. Turn that over to you, Mr.
Yeah,
Rose.
thank you, Your Worship. So as council is aware, Councillor Alderson has resigned. Under the Municipal Government Act, I have to formally inform council at the next council meeting, which is this council meeting, that his resignation is complete and he has resigned. So under policy, we'll be talking to him about a tree for next spring. So the council just wants a resolution thanking him for his service.
Yep. Absolutely. Anytime that somebody can serve their community, and this has been a tough couple of years going through everything. So I would like to say thank you very much to Jason Alderson now for serving as a councillor for 5 years for the town of Rocky Mountain House. Appreciate all of his efforts, and we wish him well in his future travels to Manitoba. So we could send a letter of appreciation and great. So just a motion then to accept. Councillor Phillips.
I'll make a motion that we send a letter of appreciation for Jason Alderson's 5 years of service on town council.
Councillor Brown.
I'd just like to maybe ask that we all get the opportunity to sign it, make it a little more personal so that he knows all of us appreciate the work he's done.
Good idea. You okay with that?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Any other conversation? Okay, all in favor of that motion? Okay, and that's carried, so we'll make sure we get that letter possibly for next Tuesday, and then we can have everybody sign it next Tuesday's council.
Sorry, while we're on the topic of that, the committees that Councillor Alderson sat on before, do we need to address those today?
No, we're working on those.
Okay.
We just
I have a question about
Yeah, Councillor Duran.
just in a formality and from my own curiosity, what would happen in the case of a tie now, like if we were like a 3-3 vote in something?
Tie is defeated.
Oh, right, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Nope. Okay, seeing none. Correspondence or action, none. So just a motion to accept the correspondence for information, 10.1 to 10.16. Councillor Ald?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? It's carried. Okay. Then move on to, are we okay for finger minutes? Okay. Move on to 11.1, my report. Does anybody have any questions for me? Okay, just a motion to accept. Councillor Phillips?
I'll make a motion to accept the mayor's report.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? Carried. Does anybody have any questions for the written council reports? Okay, and I'll ask Councillor Narang, did you have a verbal that you wanted to say?
No, I mean, it affects my expense report, but I don't have anything to add to that, so sorry for not getting that written in. Marina did remind me, so I'm bad counselor this week, or this month.
So I will make a motion then to accept Councillor Alderson's, Alds, Browns, Fraser's, and Phillips' written report. Can I put it in the same motion to accept verbal from Councillor Narang?
Yep.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. So we have the action list. Does anybody have any questions on the current action list? I see something that's, oh no, forget it. Councillor Ald?
Dean, can you clarify again when the open house for the airport inspection is?
Yeah, so Your Worship, we just received the revised drawings from the consultant this week. We have a meeting set up on Thursday with the consultant and then to figure out the public engagement program. So I would say towards the end of February, that'll be out to the stakeholders.
Good. Just a motion then to accept the action list, please, as presented. Councillor Brown? All in favor of that motion? It's carried. Now to the administrative inquiries. Does anybody have any administrative inquiries? Councillor Fraser?
I just had a question, and it's just more a comment, as I know that things are fluid as we get things off the ground with the Eco Center, but there was a question about whether there might be a pay-as-you-throw or a punch card system for those who aren't doing the full year. And obviously, I know there's a lot of math involved, so I just said I would bring it forward as a suggestion, and so that's just me doing that.
Yeah, so Your Worship, I mean, that has been a discussion among administration, and we didn't go down that path yet or bring that to council, so now, because that would only apply to a non-resident.
Yes.
Right? So with the Rocky Pass the way it is right now, it's just a lot administratively simpler. It's just a yearly pass. And our thought was if you do recycle, then you probably recycle all year.
That's true.
But I mean, that's something we can probably talk to council about after the program is run.
Yes.
For a bit more.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Narang?
I had a question about if there is ever going to be a potential that our summary notes from negotiations would ever be able to be made public. There was just a suggestion I noticed on Facebook that might be something that the town could release, but I wasn't sure that is the case.
So, Your Worship, the way it is right now, no, we cannot release it because it's part of negotiations. But both parties agreed to make that public, then they could be.
Okay.
How would we instigate or
Yeah.
implement that?
That would be just a request to Clearwater County.
Not yet, I don't think.
Okay. I do have one as well. Because we've just redone the LUB and MDP, and I know it's been so much work, I'm just wondering how we can highlight the changes to that LUB and MDP, and I'm wondering if we couldn't have some sort of like a big, this is how it's changed and this is what you can do, because I think there's a lot of excitement around this, the changes that have been made. And I've talked to a few real estate agents, just asking their thoughts on, and they haven't had time to go through the whole thing yet, but, I'm just wondering if we could do like a quick summary of what's changed, how it's different.
Yeah, we can probably I'll work with the communications coordinator to help me, and we'll put, I think we actually have a kind of a brief sheet already done in regards to what's been, the major changes, especially in the industrial area, as far as minimizing the size of the lots and that type of stuff, so.
Sure.
And even with highway commercial lots as well, so, we can highlight the ones that are, that people will grab onto or be interested in.
Sure.
Coles Mills version?
Sure.
Yeah, I'd like to see that because I think it's exciting for our community, and I think we need to really ramp up the excitement and get developers and real estate agents, excited about it. And then if possible, if they do have more questions, maybe we could have a Zoom meeting or something like that.
I forwarded the LUB and that onto the real estate people in regards to the interactive one, and again, like, if they have any questions, please contact us. We're going to be giving them maps as well for their offices to follow up, but yeah, we can reach out and say if you have, if there's something you need more clarification on, we'll definitely speak with the real estate people.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of them had said, it's a big document. So I think if we just start with the highlighted areas that have changed, the most recent and significant changes, that would be best. You don't need a motion for that. Just bring that back. Okay. Any other administrative inquiries? Okay. So, notices of motion. No? Okay, it is 2:12, and I'll call for a 5-minute break before we go into closed session.